Hi, I'm Sarah, and I need to tell you about the birthday that changed everything. For 8 weeks leading up to my 38th birthday, my younger sister Emma kept whispering the same haunting phrase, "Just wait, something amazing is coming your way." And God help me. I believed her. I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, after years of being the invisible daughter, the forgotten sister, the afterthought in every family gathering, this would finally be my moment to shine. But when I walked into what I thought was my surprise party, the cake had her name written in elegant gold script. The vintage sapphire ring that had been promised to me since I was 16, our great-grandmother's engagement ring, was sparkling on her finger. And the guest list? Well, let me put it this way. There were 47 people there, and not a single one of them knew it was supposed to be my birthday. Here's the question that's been haunting me ever since. What do you do when your own family builds their happiness on your silence? When they've grown so comfortable with your invisibility that they forget you're even human? Do you finally speak up? Or do you keep waiting for something beautiful that was never meant for you? Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when Emma sent that first text. I was sitting in my tiny kitchen, stirring honey into my chamomile tea, the same routine I'd followed for the past 3 years since moving back home to help Mom with her diabetes management. The message lit up my phone screen like a beacon of hope. "Sarah, just wait. Something amazing is coming for your birthday this year. I promise." I stared at that text for what felt like an eternity. Emma had never, and I mean never, shown any interest in my birthday. In fact, for the past 6 years, my birthdays had been exercises in disappointment. Last year, I spent the entire day waiting for someone, anyone, to remember. By 9 p.m., I was sitting alone in my room with a grocery store cupcake and a single candle, singing happy birthday to myself in a whisper so Mom wouldn't hear and feel guilty. But this text felt different. There was an energy to it, an excitement I hadn't felt from Emma since we were kids, building pillow forts in our shared bedroom. Maybe she was finally ready to be the sister I'd always hoped for. Maybe our relationship was finally going to turn a corner after years of her treating me like an inconvenient roommate rather than family. I spent the next 3 days in a state I can only describe as cautious euphoria. I found myself browsing Pinterest boards titled Intimate Birthday Celebrations and How to Feel Special on Your Day. And I even allowed myself to imagine what it might look like. Maybe a small gathering in Mom's backyard with string lights and home-cooked food. Maybe Emma had finally noticed how hard I'd been working, how much I'd sacrificed to take care of our family. Maybe she saw that I needed to feel important. Just once. The first crack in my fantasy came exactly 1 week later. Emma had asked me to help her carry groceries from her car. She'd just returned from what looked like a massive shopping trip to 3 different stores. As we unloaded bag after bag of organic produce, artisanal cheeses, and expensive wine, I noticed a pristine white box tucked behind her designer handbag. The ribbon was a deep burgundy velvet, and the corners were folded with mathematical precision. I recognized that box immediately. I had wrapped it myself 18 months earlier as a graduation gift for our cousin Rebecca, an expensive skincare set that she never even opened. Now here it was, nestled in Emma's car like it was a brand new purchase. "Oh, that," Emma said when she caught me staring. Her voice had that practiced casualness that people use when they're lying. "I'm reusing the box. You know, sustainability and all that, reduce, reuse, recycle, right?" "Right," I said slowly, forcing a smile. "Sustainability." But as we carried those groceries into the house, groceries that cost more than I spent on food in 2 months, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Why would Emma need such an expensive-looking gift box for my birthday? And more importantly, Why did she look like she'd been caught stealing when I noticed it? The warning signs started accumulating like storm clouds after that. Mom, who usually dropped heavy hints about keeping birthday expectations low, suddenly went radio silent whenever I mentioned the date. Instead of her usual, "Let's just keep it simple this year, sweetheart," she started saying things like, "We'll see what the week brings, and don't worry about making plans just yet." Then there was David. David, who used to be. Well, it's complicated. We'd been best friends since college, and for the past 2 years, there had been something undefined but beautiful growing between us. He was the one person who had never forgotten my birthday, who always showed up with thoughtful gifts and genuine warmth, but suddenly, David was everywhere, except around me. I'd see his car in our driveway when I came home from my part-time job at the community center. I'd hear his laugh echoing from the kitchen when I was upstairs, but whenever I came downstairs, he'd be gone, leaving only the faint scent of his cologne and the feeling that I'd just missed something important. When I asked him directly if he was free the weekend of my birthday, his response sent ice through my veins. He looked at Emma before answering, actually looked at her like he needed permission to speak to me. "It's going to be a really busy month for me, Sarah. I'm not sure I can commit to anything specific." I told myself stories to explain away the growing unease. Maybe they were all being secretive because they were planning something spectacular. Maybe David was helping Emma organize the surprise, and that's why he was being distant. Maybe Mom was staying quiet because she didn't want to accidentally spoil whatever beautiful thing they had planned. But unease is a persistent creature. It lives in the pauses between words, in the way conversations die when you enter a room, in the glances that don't quite meet your eyes. It speaks through nervous laughter that doesn't match the supposed joke, and it builds slowly, then all at once, until you can't ignore it anymore. That night, I sat at my old desk, the same one I'd used for homework in high school, with a glass of wine and my forgotten journal. The pages smelled faintly of the lavender sachets Mom used to put in our dresser drawers. I hadn't written in it for over a year, but that night, the words flowed like water. "I don't want to get my hopes up," I wrote, "but I am. I really, really am. For the first time in years, I'm allowing myself to dream about feeling important, feeling seen, feeling loved by the people who are supposed to love me most." I wrote down every secret wish, a heartfelt toast, a cake with my name on it, maybe even a speech about how much my sacrifices had meant to the family. I wrote it all out like a prayer to a universe that had stopped listening to me years ago. Then I closed the journal, sealing those dreams inside like pressed flowers, and tried to fall asleep. My phone buzzed with another message from Emma, a grinning emoji followed by, "We're planning something absolutely unforgettable, Gross. You're going to die." Looking back now, I realized she wasn't lying. I was going to die, just not in the way I expected. The next few weeks passed in a haze of anticipation and growing dread. Emma became increasingly unavailable. Even when we were in the same room, she'd be physically present but mentally somewhere else, constantly checking her phone, taking mysterious calls that she'd answer in hushed tones while walking to another room. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way conversations stopped abruptly when I entered the kitchen, the way Mom would quickly minimize her computer screen when I walked past, the way David's visits became more frequent but somehow less mine. He wasn't coming to see me anymore. He was coming to see them. One evening, as I was helping Mom organize her medication cabinet, I asked as casually as I could manage, "Should I be worried that everyone's acting so strange? Or am I being paranoid?" Mom's laugh was too bright, too quick. "Don't be silly, sweetheart. You know how Emma gets when she's excited about something. She's always been dramatic. But her hand trembled slightly as she arranged the pill bottles, and she wouldn't meet my eyes in the mirror above the sink. 3 weeks before my birthday, I volunteered to do the family laundry, something I rarely offered to do, but I needed to stay busy. The house had been buzzing with an energy that felt both electric and exclusionary, whispered conversations behind closed doors, doors that never used to be closed. Emma's laptop snapping shut whenever I walked by, Mom making phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. As I sorted through Dad's winter coats to check for forgotten tissues or receipts, my fingers found something unexpected in his breast pocket. It was thick, expensive cardstock with gilded edges, the kind of invitation that screams, "Important event." I almost tossed it onto the pile without looking. Almost. But curiosity has always been my weakness. The invitation was embossed with an intricate floral design, and the font was the kind of elegant script you see in wedding magazines. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Emma Catherine Morrison and David James Parker. My heart didn't stop. It didn't race. It just paused. Like a record player when someone bumps the table, my eyes found the date at the bottom of the card, and the world tilted slightly off its axis. October 15th, my birthday. I read it again, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was a second date. Maybe this was just the engagement announcement and the actual party was different. But no. There it was, in that beautiful mocking script, October 15th. The day that had belonged to me for 38 years was now theirs. I slipped the invitation back where I'd found it, smoothing the fabric of Dad's coat like I'd never touched it. For a moment, I just stood there in the dim laundry room, listening to the rhythmic tumble of the dryer and trying to process what I'd just discovered. Maybe they just hadn't told me yet. Maybe this was still part of the surprise. A double celebration, perhaps. My birthday and their engagement. 2 happy occasions rolled into one magnificent party where I'd finally feel included, important, loved. I clung to those maybes like life preservers in a storm that was only getting stronger. The next few days were a masterclass in willful blindness. I watched Emma float through the house with a glow I'd never seen before, talking animatedly on the phone about centerpieces and color schemes and the perfect venue. I watched David bring her flowers, not the simple daisies he used to bring me, but elaborate arrangements of roses and peonies that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I watched Mom beam with pride as she helped Emma plan what was clearly going to be the event of the season. And I told myself that they were just really good at keeping secrets. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves through the smallest details. Like the way Emma suddenly had professional manicure appointments. Like the way Mom started talking about our photographer and the caterer Emma found. Like the way David stopped making eye contact with me altogether, as if looking at me might give something away. The breaking point came during what should have been a normal family dinner. We were all seated around Mom's antique dining table, the one that had hosted every important family meal for the past 20 years. The food was delicious, the wine was flowing, and the conversation was animated, but somehow, mysteriously, none of it included me. I sat there watching my family discuss wedding venues and engagement party themes like I was a piece of furniture. At one point, Emma stood up and raised her glass in what seemed like a practiced toast. "Here's to surprise it," she said, her eyes sparkling as she looked at David and Mom. "And to dreams coming true in the most unexpected ways." Everyone raised their glasses except me. I sat there with my wine untouched, watching the 3 most important people in my life share a moment of joy that had absolutely nothing to do with me. When Mom asked me to help clear the dishes while the others finalized some details, I finally understood what was happening. I wasn't being included in the planning because I wasn't really invited to the party. I was being assigned to the cleanup crew of my own birthday. That night, I sat on my bed with the invitation clutched in both hands. I'd gone back to get it after everyone had gone to sleep, and now I stared at it like it might transform into something different. Something that made sense in a world where families protected each other instead of erasing each other. But the words remained the same. Emma and David. October 15th, the day that was supposed to be mine. The morning after I found that invitation, I woke up feeling like I was living in someone else's life. Have you ever had that sensation where everything looks the same, but feels completely foreign? That's what my childhood bedroom felt like. The same pale yellow walls, the same white furniture, the same view of the oak tree I used to climb as a kid, but somehow I no longer belonged there. I made my way downstairs for coffee, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The hallway photo wall, Mom's pride and joy, the carefully curated display of our family's greatest hits, had been completely transformed overnight. What used to be maybe 15 framed photos had exploded into what looked like 40 or 50 pictures, all perfectly arranged in a symmetrical pattern that screamed professional interior design. I stood there with my coffee mug growing cold in my hands, scanning every single frame. There were pictures from Emma's college graduation, her first job celebration, her recent promotion party. There were photos of David at family barbecues, David helping Mom in the garden, David and Emma laughing over some inside joke at last Christmas dinner. There were beautiful shots of Mom looking proud and radiant at various celebrations. And then there was me. Or rather, there wasn't me. I spent 20 minutes examining every photograph, looking for even a sliver of myself, a shoulder in the background, a hand reaching for something, anything that proved I had existed in these moments. But I had been systematically edited out of our family's visual history. Not forgotten, removed? There's a difference, and it cuts so much deeper. In one particularly cruel twist, I found a photo from my own college graduation party, but it had been cropped so that only Mom, Dad, and Emma were visible, standing around what appeared to be an empty space where I should have been. The composition was awkward, clearly altered, but apparently that was preferable to including me in the frame. I touched the edge of one photograph, Mom holding a toddler Emma at the beach, and then pulled my hand back like I'd touched something that might burn me. No one had said anything about this overnight renovation. No one had to. The message was crystal clear. This family's story was being rewritten, and I wasn't part of the new narrative. Later that afternoon, when Emma asked me to help organize her room while she went to meet with another vendor, I said yes without thinking. It's funny how we fall back into old patterns, even when we know they're destroying us. I'd been the helpful older sister for so long that it was pure muscle memory. Emma's room looked like a bridal magazine had exploded. There were fabric samples scattered across her desk, venue brochures fanned out on her dresser, and gift bags stacked in the corner with tissue paper overflowing like pastel flowers. As I folded her laundry and organized the chaos, I tried not to think about how this room used to be our shared space when we were kids, how we used to stay up late whispering about our dreams and promising we'd always be best friends. That's when I found it. A small square card had slipped from one of the gift bags and landed face up on the carpet. I picked it up, and my heart stopped for the second time in a week. The front was covered in glittery embossed flowers that caught the light like tiny mirrors. Inside, in a font too perfect to be personal, were the words, "Happy Birthday, Sarah," printed in elegant script. The rest of the card was completely blank. No message, no signature, no date, no love. Just those 3 impersonal words floating in an ocean of white space. I stared at that card for what felt like an hour, but was probably only minutes. This was it. This was my birthday acknowledgement. A generic, unsigned card that had been purchased as an afterthought, probably grabbed from a gas station on someone's way to buy something actually important. I should have been angry. I should have marched downstairs and demanded an explanation. But instead, I felt something much worse than anger. I felt profound sadness for the woman who would receive this card and pretend it was enough. I felt sorry for the me who had spent 38 years accepting scraps and calling them meals. I gently placed the card back in its envelope and slid it exactly where it had fallen, as if it had never happened, as if I had never seen the physical proof of how little I mattered to the people who were supposed to love me most. That evening's dinner was an exercise in torture disguised as family time. Emma dominated the conversation with what I now realized was wedding planning thinly veiled as general party coordination. She talked about centerpieces and lighting, about hiring a professional photographer and a string quartet. She mentioned the caterer she'd found who specialized in elegant garden parties, and the florist who could create something truly magical. "I've already finished putting together the slideshow," Emma announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's going to tell our whole story, childhood, college, that amazing trip to Paris, the proposal, a complete journey of true love." She looked at me suddenly, as if remembering I was sitting there. "You'll absolutely love it, Sarah. It's so romantic." "Do you need any help with it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm pretty good with video editing." Emma's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, it's already completely done. But thank you for offering." Already done. She had compiled a slideshow of her and David's whole story without once considering that I might have been part of that story too. Without acknowledging that David and I had been close friends long before he ever noticed Emma. Without mentioning that I was the one who introduced them at Mom's birthday party 2 years ago, thinking they might enjoy each other's company for one evening. I excused myself before dessert and went upstairs to my room, where I did something I hadn't done in years. I connected my old video camera to my laptop and started going through hours of family footage I'd shot over the past decade. What I found was devastating in its consistency. There I was, behind the camera at every single family celebration. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduation celebrations, holiday dinners. In every video, you could hear my voice from behind the lens, asking people to smile, suggesting poses, encouraging them to say something for the camera. My laughter echoed through the recordings, but it was always one-sided. No one ever responded to my jokes. No one ever asked me to get in the frame. No one ever said, "Sarah, get over here so we can get a picture of all of us together." Oh, in one particularly painful clip, I watched Emma open a graduation gift that I had spent weeks choosing and wrapping with care. Mom thanked her for her hard work. Dad praised her accomplishments. David complimented her strength and determination. But no one mentioned that the gift came from me. You could hear my voice off camera saying, "I hope you love it." But Emma never acknowledged where it came from. It was like I was a ghost, present but unseen, caring but unacknowledged. I whispered to my empty room, did I ever really belong here? And for the first time in my adult life, I couldn't come up with a convincing yes. The tears came then. But they weren't the tears of anger or betrayal I expected. They were tears of grief, grief for the family I thought I had, grief for the relationships I thought were real, grief for the version of myself who had been content to love people who couldn't even see her clearly enough to love her back. Before I went to bed, I opened the family's shared photo album on my phone and scrolled until I found my baby picture, the one of me on Dad's lap with chocolate birthday cake smeared across my cheeks and pure joy in my eyes. I looked at that little girl who believed she was loved unconditionally, who trusted that her family would always see her and celebrate her and protect her place in their hearts. Then I clicked the 3 dots and selected Delete from Shared Album. The system asked if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. If they wanted to rewrite our family history without me in it, I could help them along. Within minutes of deleting that photo, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't seen in over 2 years. My heart stopped when I saw the name. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister who lived across the country and only contacted us during major family emergencies. "Are you awake? I need to tell you something important." I stared at that message for a full minute before responding. "Yes, you can call me." The phone rang immediately. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice came through soft and careful, like she was trying not to wake someone. This is going to sound strange, and I'm sorry if I'm overstepping boundaries, but I think you need to be prepared for something. My heart started pounding. Prepared for what? "I don't know the whole picture," she continued, "but your mother has been calling me for weeks, asking for advice about a delicate family situation. She's been coordinating something with Emma, something big, and Sarah. Your name hasn't come up once. Not once." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she spoke again, her voice was even gentler. "Honey, I think they're planning to leave you out of something important. On purpose. And I think they've convinced themselves they're doing it for your own good." "What does that mean?" I managed to ask. I wish I knew. But I've been in this family long enough to recognize the signs of when people are making decisions about someone instead of with someone. I thought you deserved to hear it from someone who actually sees you. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, trying to process what she'd just given me. It wasn't just information, it was validation. And somehow, that validation hurt worse than the gaslighting had, because now I knew for certain that I wasn't crazy, wasn't oversensitive, wasn't imagining things. I was being systematically excluded from my own life by the people who claimed to love me. I threw on a sweatshirt and stepped outside into the crisp October air. Our neighborhood was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of leaves in the wind. I started walking without any destination in mind, just needing to move, needing to feel like I had some control over where I was going, even if I couldn't control where I belonged. As I walked past house after house with warm lights glowing in the windows, I thought about how many times I'd been told I was too sensitive, or that I took things the wrong way, or that I was reading too much into perfectly innocent situations. How many times had I apologized for feeling hurt by things that were genuinely hurtful? How many times had I convinced myself that my perceptions were wrong simply because it was easier than believing that the people I loved were capable of being so carelessly cruel? Maybe that was the point. If you can convince someone they're wrong often enough, you don't have to tell them anything anymore. You can just assume they'll fill in the blanks with grace. Stay quiet. Stay small. Stay grateful for whatever scraps of attention they receive. When I rounded the corner back toward our house, I could see silhouettes moving behind the drawn curtains of our living room. Emma, Mom, probably David, planning something beautiful that wasn't meant for me, planning my erasure while sitting in the house I helped maintain, eating food I helped buy, surrounded by the warmth and comfort I helped create. The next morning, I decided to test a theory. Over lukewarm coffee, I asked Mom casually, "Is everything okay with Aunt Linda? She called me pretty late last night." Mom's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips, and her eyes sharpened with an alertness that hadn't been there seconds before. Really? She said, setting down her cup with deliberate care. What did she want? She just wanted to catch up. I lied. You know how she gets sometimes. She seemed a little worried about family dynamics. Mom's laugh was too loud and too quick. Well, you know Linda. She's always been a bit dramatic, reading things into situations that aren't there. She worries too much about things that are none of her business. But her hands were trembling slightly as she folded the newspaper, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. The conversation died there, but the knowledge it gave me lived on. That afternoon, while Mom was at her book club and Emma was out doing mysterious errands, I did something I'd never done before. I opened Mom's laptop. She'd always been terrible with technology and used the same password for everything, and started looking through the family email threads. What I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. There was a folder labeled Emma's Big Day, Final Coordination, that contained dozens of emails dating back 3 months. 3 months. They had been planning this for 3 months, and I had been completely excluded from every single conversation. I opened the most recent thread and started reading. The email chain included Mom, Emma, David, even several cousins and family friends I barely kept in touch with. They discussed catering menus, seating arrangements, speeches, photography timelines, and budget allocations. They debated between salmon and chicken, argued about whether to have a DJ or live music, and carefully planned who would give toasts and in what order. But it was one particular exchange that made my blood run cold. Emma. What about Sarah? Should we include her in the planning at all? Mom, I think it's better if we handle this ourselves. You know how she gets when she feels like she's not the center of attention. This day should be about you and David, not about managing Sarah's feelings. David. Maybe we could give her something small to do, like helping with decorations. Emma. I don't want to risk her getting overwhelmed or emotional. Let's just keep this simple and tell her about it closer to the date. Mom. Agreed. Sarah's not needed for this one. We can handle everything ourselves, and she'll just be grateful to be included at all. I read those words over and over until they burned themselves into my memory. Sarah's not needed for this one. Managing Sarah's feelings, she'll just be grateful to be included at all. They weren't protecting me from stress or trying to surprise me. They were protecting themselves from having to consider my feelings, my opinions, my very existence as a person who might have something valuable to contribute to what was supposedly a family celebration. I copied that entire email thread into a document and saved it in 3 different places. Not because I planned to use it as evidence or ammunition, but because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that this was really happening, that this level of casual cruelty was actually being directed at me by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. As I sat there staring at my laptop screen, I felt something shift inside me. The part of me that had been making excuses for them, that had been bending over backward to understand their perspective, that had been willing to accept crumbs and call it love, that part finally went quiet. In its place, something stronger and clearer began to emerge. For the first time in my life, I was seeing my family exactly as they were, not as I desperately needed them to be. And what I saw was 3 people who had grown so comfortable with my invisibility that they had forgotten I was even human. 3 days before what should have been my birthday, Emma knocked on my door with an instruction that felt like a slap wrapped in silk. "You should dress nicely tonight," she said, not bothering to step into my room. Her voice carried that particular tone people use when they're doing you a favor by including you at all. Dinner's going to be kind of special. No explanation, no invitation. Just orders delivered with the casual expectation that I would comply, smile, and be grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. I stared at that closed door long after her footsteps faded down the hallway, and for the first time in my life, I felt something dangerous brewing inside me. Not just hurt, but actual rage. But I got dressed anyway. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one with the subtle beading that I'd been saving for a special occasion. I did my makeup carefully, styled my hair, even wore the pearl earrings Dad had given me for my college graduation. If this was going to be a performance, I was going to look the part. By the time I came downstairs, our house had been transformed into something from a magazine spread. String lights were wound through the ceiling beams like captured stars. Elaborate floral arrangements lined every surface, and the scent of expensive catered food floated through the air like perfume. The back patio had been turned into an elegant garden party venue, complete with linen-draped tables, professional lighting, and a sound system playing soft jazz. This wasn't just a dinner. This was a full-scale event that had probably cost more than I made in 6 months at my part-time job. I stepped onto the patio and felt my world tilt completely off its axis. There were at least 60 people scattered across our backyard. Colleagues, family friends, distant relatives, college buddies I hadn't seen in years. Everyone was dressed in cocktail attire, holding champagne glasses, laughing and chatting like this was the social event of the season. And there, positioned like the crown jewel of the entire evening, was a 3-tiered cake that belonged in a wedding magazine. It was covered in white fondant with delicate gold detailing, surrounded by a garden of sugar flowers that probably took days to create. Across the top, in elegant script that matched the invitation I'd found, were the words, "Congratulations, Emma and David." No mention of a birthday, no happy 38th Sarah. Nothing to indicate that this day had ever belonged to anyone but them. The sound of applause erupted behind me, and I turned to see Emma appearing at the top of the back steps like a princess making her grand entrance. She was wearing a stunning white cocktail dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair styled in an elegant updo, her makeup professionally done. She looked absolutely radiant, glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from having all your dreams come true exactly as planned. David appeared beside her in a perfectly tailored suit, beaming like he'd just won the lottery. Camera flashes popped from every direction as guests cheered and toasted and celebrated the beautiful couple who had found their happily ever after. I stood there in the middle of it all, holding an untouched glass of champagne, watching my family celebrate the love story that had been built on the ruins of mine. Not a single person approached me. Not one guest asked why I looked shell-shocked, or why I was standing alone, or why the birthday girl seemed so disconnected from her own party. Because they didn't know it was supposed to be my birthday. They had no idea they were attending a celebration that had erased me so completely that even the date had been stolen. Mom appeared beside the happy couple and raised her glass high. Her voice carried across the patio with the kind of maternal pride that I had spent 38 years hoping to inspire. "To Emma," she declared, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy, "and to the bright, beautiful future she's building with the man of her dreams. To love that conquers all, and to dreams that come true when you're brave enough to reach for them." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Someone near me leaned over to their companion and whispered, "Isn't this around the sister's birthday, too?" The other person shrugged dismissively. "Must be a different weekend. Emma would never steal her sister's thunder like that. If only they knew." I found Emma about an hour later, as the party was hitting its stride and the champagne was flowing freely. She was touching up her lipstick in the hallway mirror, glowing with the satisfaction of a perfectly executed plan. When she saw me approaching in the reflection, her smile didn't waver. "Isn't this amazing?" she said. capping her lipstick with a satisfied click. "Everything turned out so much better than I even imagined. You used my birthday for this," I said. The words came out quieter than I'd intended, but they carried the weight of 38 years of accumulated hurt. Emma finally turned to face me, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across her features. Guilt, maybe, or recognition of what she'd done, but it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. "Don't be so dramatic, Sarah," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "It's just a date. There are 365 days in a year." "It's my date," I said, my voice stronger now. "It's been my date for 38 years. Emma's perfectly applied smile faltered slightly. "Look, we tried to find another weekend, but the venue was completely booked. The caterer, the photographer, the musicians, everyone we wanted was only available this weekend. You understand, right? This is a once-in-a-lifetime event." "And my birthday isn't?" She blinked at me like I'd asked her to solve calculus. "Sarah, come on. You being here tonight should be enough. Really. Your presence is the best gift we could ask for. Your presence is enough." As if my mere existence in the corner of their celebration was some generous gift they were bestowing upon me. As if I should be grateful for the privilege of watching them build their happiness on the grave of my special day. I backed away from her before I said something I couldn't take back, though part of me was starting to wonder why I was still protecting people who clearly felt no need to protect me. Outside, the night air hit me like a wake-up call. I walked to the far edge of our property, where the music faded to a distant hum and the laughter became just another sound in the night. I pulled out my phone, hoping for something, anything that might ground me in reality. There was a new notification from the family photo sharing group. Someone had uploaded a picture of the group gathered around the celebration cake, everyone raising their glasses in a perfect toast to the happy couple. And there I was, barely visible in the frame, standing so far to the side that half my body was cropped out of the shot. Whether by accident or design, I'd been edited out of yet another family moment. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned, then deleted it before it could finish loading completely. I shoved my phone into my coat pocket and looked back at the glowing house, at the silhouettes of my family and their friends dancing and celebrating and living their best lives. And I made a decision that would change everything. Not again. Not ever again. This time. I wasn't swallowing the hurt. I wasn't making excuses. I wasn't protecting people who had never once thought to protect me. This time, I was going to tell the truth. The morning after the engagement party felt like waking up in someone else's nightmare. I could hear the sounds of cleanup happening downstairs, the clink of champagne glasses being collected, the rustle of decorations being taken down, the satisfied murmur of voices rehashing the evening's success. I was still wearing yesterday's dress, having collapsed on top of my bed covers sometime around 2 a.m. after spending hours walking through the neighborhood, trying to process what had happened. My makeup was smeared, my hair was a mess, and I felt like I'd been hit by a truck carrying a load of broken dreams. But when I pushed myself upright and looked toward my bedroom door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. 3 cardboard boxes sat stacked neatly beside my bookshelf, each one labeled in Mom's precise handwriting, Sarah's Things. I stumbled out of bed and opened my closet to find that half my clothes were gone. The remaining items looked lonely and sparse, like the clearance rack at a store that was going out of business. My books had been packed, my personal photos removed from the dresser, my desk accessories boxed up like I was moving out. Mom appeared in the doorway holding a cup of coffee, and the casualness of her expression told me everything I needed to know about how normal this felt to her. "We thought since you're hardly ever home these days anyway," she said with that practiced gentleness that always made me feel like the unreasonable one. "It might make sense to start transitioning this room. Emma and David are going to need a nursery soon, and this is the best natural light." A nursery. They were turning my childhood bedroom, the room where I'd cried over teenage heartbreaks, studied for college exams, and hidden away during every family crisis, into a nursery for the children Emma and David would have together. "It'll give you a good reason to finally get your own place," Mom continued, as if she was doing me a favor. "You're 38, sweetheart. It's time to start building your own life instead of hiding out here with us." Hiding out. As if the 3 years I'd spent helping her manage her diabetes, driving her to doctor's appointments, handling her insurance paperwork, and keeping this house running while working part-time jobs was just me avoiding adult responsibility. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the previous night's emotional marathon. "There are plenty of nice apartments in town," she said with a shrug. "Linda mentioned there's a complex near her work that has good rates for single women. I can ask her to look into it for you." Single women. Like I was some spinster charity case who needed help finding appropriate housing for my sad, solitary existence. Later that afternoon, while I was mechanically folding what clothes hadn't been boxed up, Emma waltzed in holding an armful of brochures and fabric samples. Her post-engagement glow had only intensified overnight, and she moved through the space like she was already mentally redecorating. "We've picked the venue for the wedding," she announced, waving a glossy pamphlet like a victory flag. "Wait until you see this place. Sarah, it's absolutely magical." I glanced down at the brochure, and my heart stopped for what felt like the 100th time in recent weeks. I knew that vineyard. I knew it because I had bookmarked their website 2 years ago, when David and I were first starting to dance around the possibility of something more than friendship. I had shown him their photos over coffee one autumn afternoon, describing the way the light filtered through the grapevines at sunset, the rustic elegance of their event spaces, the romantic magic of their gardens. "That's actually beautiful," he'd said, reaching across the table to hold my hand for the first time. "I can picture you there." And now here it was, featured in Emma's wedding planning materials with her name on the reservation. Emma continued chattering about the terrace where they'd hold the ceremony, the reception hall with its exposed brick walls, the garden where they'd take their wedding photos. Every detail she described was something I had dreamed about, something I had shared with David during those tentative early conversations about our future. "The photographer wants to do our engagement shoot there next month," Emma said, her eyes sparkling. "She thinks the autumn colors will be perfect with my dress." That evening, I sat at my laptop and opened the vineyard's website. Their blog featured a new post with professional photos from Emma and David's recent engagement shoot. There they were, posed beneath the same string lights I had imagined for my own photos, standing in the exact spot where I had pictured myself walking down the aisle, sharing intimate moments in the garden where I had dreamed of dancing at my own wedding reception. But it was the final photo in the series that broke something fundamental inside me. David was spinning Emma around in the vineyard, both of them laughing with pure joy, and the photographer had captured them against the backdrop of a sunset that looked like liquid gold. The caption read, "When you know, you know." Emma and David's love story continues to unfold in the most beautiful ways. I closed the laptop and sat in the growing darkness of my soon-to-be former bedroom, trying to process the magnitude of what had been stolen from me. It wasn't just my birthday or my bedroom or my place in the family. They had taken my dreams, my conversations, my most intimate hopes for the future, and they had repackaged them as their own love story. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I showered, put on my most professional outfit, and went downstairs to where my family was having breakfast around the kitchen table like nothing earth-shattering had happened. "If my room becomes a nursery," I said calmly, standing in the doorway with my car keys in my hand, "I'll move out the same day." They all looked up from their eggs and toast. Mom's fork hovered halfway to her mouth, and Emma gave me an uncertain smile, like she wasn't sure if I was joking. "And if anyone else," I continued, my voice steady and clear, "uses the dreams I shared in confidence as the blueprint for their own happiness, you won't hear from me again." Mom let out a nervous laugh. "Don't be so dramatic, sweetheart." Emma's smile faltered. "Come on, Sarah, don't be so intense about everything." "But David." David looked straight at me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw guilt flicker in his expression. Real, unmistakable guilt that told me he knew exactly what I was talking about. No one said anything else, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm that had been years in the making. After breakfast, I didn't cry or shout or slam doors like the dramatic person they'd always accused me of being. Instead, I went upstairs and packed one small suitcase with essentials. At the top of the stairs, I paused and turned back to address the 3 people who had spent years convincing me that I was too much, too sensitive, too needy. "I'm not angry that you forgot me," I said, my voice carrying down to where they were still sitting in stunned silence. "I'm angry that you made me forget myself." Then I walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. 2 weeks later, I was settled into a small but beautiful apartment across town, the kind of place I'd always been too afraid to get because it meant admitting that my family's house was never really my home. The walls were white and clean, the windows let in gorgeous natural light, and every piece of furniture was chosen by me, for me, with no one else's preferences to consider. That's when I received a text that would give me the final piece of the puzzle. "Can you bring my shoes to the venue? Left them by the front door. Thanks." No greeting, no please, no acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken since I'd moved out. Just another order delivered with the assumption that I would comply, because that's what I'd always done. I looked at those gold strappy heels sitting by Mom's front door, shoes Emma had worn exactly once before deciding they didn't go with anything, and I made a decision. I would bring her the shoes. But this time, I was going to get some answers. The drive to the vineyard was quiet except for the hum of my tires on asphalt and the steady rhythm of my heart beating with something that felt like purpose. When I arrived, the wedding coordinator greeted me with a clipboard and a harried expression. "Oh, are you with the catering staff?" she asked, not unkindly. "No," I said, holding up the shoe bag. "Just dropping something off for the bride." She nodded absently and returned to her checklist. But as she turned away, I caught a glimpse of what she was holding, a detailed guest list with seating arrangements. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Could I possibly check that list? I want to make sure my information is correct." She handed it over without thinking, probably assuming I was another vendor or family friend. I scanned the names quickly, my eyes searching for the one confirmation I needed. Sarah Morrison, Sarah Morrison, Sarah Morrison. I went through the list 3 times, checking every table, every +1 notation, every carefully planned seating arrangement. 87 names were listed for Emma and David's wedding reception. 87 people who had been deemed important enough to witness their love story. My name wasn't there. I handed the clipboard back to the coordinator and stood there for a moment, letting the final truth settle into my bones. This wasn't an oversight or a mistake or a case of the invitation getting lost in the mail. I had been deliberately, systematically excluded from my sister's wedding. The sister I had loved unconditionally for 38 years had decided that I wasn't important enough to witness the most important day of her life. As I stood there, processing this last betrayal, David appeared from around the corner of the main building. He was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, looking like he was heading to or coming from some kind of vendor meeting. When he saw me, his step faltered. "Sarah," he said, and my name came out like an apology. "You made it." "I wasn't invited," I replied simply. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes drifted to the shoes in my hand, and I could see him searching for words that might make the situation feel less devastating than it was. "Thanks for bringing those," he finally said, reaching for the bag. As he took it from me, I noticed something that made my heart stop one final time. On his finger was a ring I recognized immediately, a simple gold band that had belonged to my grandfather. But that wasn't what made me gasp. What made me gasp was seeing it paired with the engagement ring Emma was wearing, my grandmother's ring. The vintage platinum Art Deco piece that had been in our family for 4 generations. The ring that Mom had promised would be mine when I got engaged. The ring I had tried on in secret as a teenager while dreaming about my future wedding day. "I didn't know she was using that ring," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. David looked down at his hand like he'd forgotten what he was wearing. "It's what your mom suggested. She said it should stay in the family." The irony was suffocating. The ring that was supposed to stay in the family was going to the daughter who had been embraced, while the daughter who had been erased was standing there, watching it slip away forever. "It was supposed to be mine," I said, not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. He didn't deny it, couldn't deny it, because he'd been there 2 years ago when Mom had pulled me aside during Christmas dinner and made that promise in front of half the family. He'd heard her say, "When Sarah finds the right person, this ring will be perfect for her." "Your mom said you didn't like pressure," David said quietly. "She said you preferred being in the background, that you were more comfortable when you weren't the center of attention." My throat tightened, not with sadness this time, but with a rage so pure it felt like lightning in my veins. "You believed her?" I asked. He shrugged, and that small gesture contained more betrayal than any words could have. "You didn't fight for it." "I wasn't given the chance to fight for it," I said. "I wasn't given the chance to fight for anything." The truth hung between us like a bridge that could never be rebuilt. David knew, had always known, that I'd loved him first. He knew that I'd introduced him to Emma thinking they might enjoy one conversation, not imagining that my mother would see an opportunity to finally give her favorite daughter everything she'd ever wanted, including the man who had been falling in love with me. He knew, and he'd chosen the easier path. The path where he didn't have to stand up to my mother's manipulations or navigate the complexity of choosing between sisters. The path where he got to be the hero of Emma's story instead of the complicated footnote in mine. Neither of us spoke after that. I turned and walked back toward my car, pausing only to take a photo of the guest list that was still posted by the entrance. Not because I planned to use it as evidence, but because I needed proof that this had really happened. That I had really been erased this completely by people who claimed to love me. I drove home with my hand steady on the wheel and my mind finally, blissfully, clear. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop and started typing. "You don't have to wait for permission to matter," I wrote. "You don't have to earn your place in someone else's story. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who love the idea of you more than they love the reality of you." I titled the post, "The Birthday That Taught Me My Worth," and hit publish on the blog I'd started the week I moved out. within hours. The comments started pouring in from people who had been through similar experiences, people who had been erased and overlooked and gaslit into believing they were asking for too much when all they wanted was basic human decency, from the people who claimed to love them. But the comment that meant the most came from Aunt Linda. "I'm proud of you for finally putting yourself first. That little girl who used to hold the camera deserves to be in the picture." As I sat in my quiet apartment that night, surrounded by furniture I'd chosen and walls I'd painted and a life that was entirely my own, I realized something profound. For the first time in 38 years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to see my worth, to celebrate my existence, to make room for me in their story. I was writing my own story, and in this version, I was the main character.